Alright, this is going to introduce us into the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was during the 18th century in which people began to change the way they viewed the world and on society. And we're going to really focus more on the um, government side. Scientific revolution. We talked about this already, but this is going to kind of get us into the current topic. Led people to view the world in a different light. It caused people to question everything that they believed. I challenged the power of the church. Once again, thinking back, just to recap this, the church was the ultimate authority. They told you how the world worked, the ways of the world. And then these scientists came along and they're like, well, I don't know if that's necessarily true. They started to investigate and challenge, and they found out um, truth for themselves. And they found out um, that the universe is governed by these natural laws, and that they can discover truth if they investigate it, rather than just relying on others. And then, so then, like I said, the connection here um, is going to be scientific revolution shows the nature in the universe could be explained through reason using mathematic precision. So people are going to use this with the relationship with um, between people in terms of scientific. So they're going to try this scientific approach that we talked about with the scientific revolution, how they're systematically the scientific method going through step by step trying to solve these scientific problems. Well, people are going to do that exact same thing. They're going to put these natural laws, they're going to put them to work in society. And so that's really the connection there. The scientific revolution is going to inspire the Enlightenment by having people challenge everything, apply the scientific method to other areas beyond just the scientific discovery. All right, and so when they start to apply this new way of thinking um, toward other areas of life, you're going to see radical changes that are going to occur. And Enlightenment principles include, like, once again, religion, tradition, superstition, limited independent thought. All right, that these ideas that we just rely on people, these traditions, just because that's the way they've always been, well, then that limits our way of thinking. Um, accept, accept knowledge based on observation, logic, and reason. By using logic, using reason, not just trusting, like, hey, and I don't mean just faith in God, but just faith in what people before them said. People, what, you know, basically, if you can use your own reason, your own logic to prove that it's true, then use that as opposed to just being like, well, Aristotle thought that years ago. Scientific and academic thinking should be based on reasoning. People using their own logic, their own reason, rather than relying on, once again, the corrupt church at the time. The Enlightenment, a lot of number included a wide variety of writers. I talked about with the printing press, more writing is going to become available, so more people are going to read these ideas. These ideas are going to spread. They challenge the old ways of thinking. They question the fact that these rulers, part of what they said was, like, God has put us into power. We have the divine right, divine meaning God. We have the divine right to rule. These Enlightenment thinkers are like, did they put you in power, or were you just kind of born into that family? And that's just the way it's been for hundreds of years. Um, and they believe that social reforms were necessary and possible in this life, not just. All right, so we're going to look at a few Enlightenment thinkers. We're going to kind of skip Hobbes here. We're going to go to he kind of came up with the social contract, but he actually argued that an absolute monarchy would be good because people are inherently bad, and that they need some strong ruler to rule over them. So we're not going to talk about him a ton, but that social contract where the government exists is this beginning of this idea where the government exists to serve or to protect the rights of the people. John Locke, going to be one of the most influential people in American history, and even though he has nothing to do, he's English, but he is going to be really he's going to show up in our Declaration of Independence, he's going to show up in our Constitution. Not him exactly, but his ideas. So he had new ideas about the relationship between the people and the ruler. But the government was created for the people. If the rules do not protect their rights, then the people had the right to get a new government. All right, that's that idea of a social contract where it's like, yeah, hey, the government doesn't exist, didn't always exist, and then people came along. It's like, no, people gave the government power, so the government exists to serve the people. But for centuries, and that seems so common sense to us, but for centuries, it's been flipped. The people existed to serve the government. You know, they're working, paying these heavy taxes, paying these tax burdens, while the government, the king, the absolute monarch, is living it up in lockstep. Well, that doesn't make sense because the government's created by people for the people. All right, so they need to take care of us. And then you know what? And if they don't do that, if the government doesn't protect the rights of us, and if the government is oppressive, then you need to find a new government because the one you've got is broken. And that's where the American Revolution is going to come in, and we're going to tie that in. Once again, government formed to protect the people's natural rights. He's the guy that said you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. That shows up in our Declaration, except it shows up as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He believed the government and power should be limited. They shouldn't be absolute. He doesn't think that it should be one person with all the power. Rejected that idea of absolute monarchy. And just if the government is taking away your rights, you need to get yourself a new government, right? Because it's the government's obligation to help those that it governs. Right? It's not the other way around. Uh, Once again, natural rights, like I said, it's in the Declaration. And natural means it's coming in nature. Right? It's God given. It cannot be taken away from you. No ruler can take those away. All right? Those are powers that all people have, not just regardless of where they live. They all have those natural rights. That's where it shows up in our Declaration. Voltaire. He is a big proponent of tolerance, reason, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. He was widely critical of the church at the time. He's famously coined the phrase, even though I disapprove of what you say, sir, I will defend to the death your right to say it. All right. So he was really an advocate for freedom of speech, having tolerance toward others, reason, logic, etc. Right. And once again, that idea of freedom of religion, which was today it makes sense because we have so many different religions, but back then it was blasphemy, right? Because it was one main church. So he was a big proponent of change. Montesquieu believed in the idea of separation of governmental powers. He believed that government works best if there's a checks and balance system. Kind of like, once again, this is exactly what we have here now. The idea came from England where they had the House of Commons and all that stuff. But his idea when he wrote The Spirit of the Laws is going to be about dividing power. So one person, because if you just give it to one person and that person's terrible, you got a terrible government. But now if you have one person in power that is not very good, then you know what? He can be checked by the other branches. And some people, and I don't want to get political, I don't care what people's views are, but if you think Trump is good or bad, say you think he's bad, well, you know what? When he puts a travel ban on, the Supreme Court can overrule that. Or the Congress can veto some of his actions. And so there's a way to limit the power of just one person. And that's what Montesquieu believed, and that's why our Constitution is based off these ideas of separation of governmental powers. And then Jean-Jacques Rousseau believed that he wrote the book called The Social Contract. The majority should rule by the will of the people. That is, it's not based on necessarily an individual, but it should be the majority rule was the will of the people, and so the government should act accordingly to the will of the people. All right, and so he wrote that idea of the social contract, the relationship between the people and the ruler. If the ruler ceases to protect the rule, then they are free to choose a new ruler. Get yourself a new government. So Rousseau, Locke, all these people they're saying that if your government's broken, do something about it. And this comes right at a time where the American colonies are just getting ticked off at the British, and we're going to talk about how obviously that's all going to lead into the American Revolution. And same thing's happening in France too, which will lead to eventually the French Revolution. And these are the key Enlightenment thinkers that we're going to talk about. John Locke inspiring the American Revolution, Jean-Jacques Rousseau with influencing the Declaration of Independence, Montesquieu inspiring our Constitution. These ideas that people should be free, people have natural rights, that the government exists to serve the people. The people rights need to be protected by the government. If they're not, you need to get a new government, overthrow the government. Ruling by the majority. All these things are radical ideas that never happened back then. It was all one person has all the power. They're born into that power, and everybody just listens to what they say. All right, so these are all transformational ideas that are going to occur during a time in which you get thrown in prison for stuff like this. All right, but they're trying to create this social change. They're trying to find scientific ways, approaches to finding better forms of government, to finding better economic systems, etc. And so these are the key Enlightenment thinkers that did that.